Hello, friends, and welcome into Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast, ranks for Week 11. I'm Chris Welsh. We've got Pat Fitzmaurice and Scott Pianowski. Today, we are talking quarterbacks and tight ends. That's right, for Week 11, we got you covered if you're looking for those streamers, those big decisions on quarterbacks, or the just brutal tight end position in general. Hopefully, we got you covered here. If you're looking for more, fantasypros.com/rankings throughout the week, and you can check out how the ranks are moving. Oh, I don't know. Maybe like if a team that said they were going to stick with a certain quarterback through the rest of the season and wouldn't possibly think about changing it, and then all of a sudden on Wednesday did, like the Colts, Anthony Richardson might be moving and a shaking. Make sure you go fantasypros.com/rankings and you can check out how they adjust all the way up until kickoff. So let's jump right into our quarterback rankings. And yes, we are going to talk about said Anthony Richardson, because guess what? He's not going to be in this top 12. Maybe no matter what, he won't be. But that was the news that broke before we started recording. Anthony Richardson is back in as quarterback for the Colts rest of season. So even if he were to be top 12, he is not reflective on here. What the top 12 board looks like, which let's jump into. Quarterback number 1, Jalen Hurts. We've got Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels, and Brock Purdy rounding out our top 5. Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Jared Goff, Jordan Love, Russ Wilson, Bo Nix, and Patrick Mahomes. That is your top 12. Those are pretty chalky plays. Maybe not so much Bo Nix, but the rushing side has definitely pushed him into here. We do have a fun question on one of these I got to hit, but we got to talk about Anthony Richardson at the top here. And Fitz, let's start with you. He is now the starting quarterback. A, will he be in the top 12? If not, B, will he even sniff the top 12? What does this do to your quarterback rankings with Richardson joining the fray?
I think I've slotted him in at quarterback 20 or quarterback 21, which is about 4 spots higher than I had Joe Flacco when I thought he was going to be the starter. I doubt he's going to be able to do a lot of business through the air against the Jets. I know the Jets defense has been really disappointing in a lot of ways this season, but the metrics still say it's a pretty good pass defense. So, Anthony Richardson is always a threat to do damage as a runner, but that's sort of inconsistent damage, and you don't really get it every week, or at least we haven't in the games he's played this season. So really hit or miss, mid-range to low-end QB2.
Scott, did you have on your player card at the beginning of the season that Bo Nix would be just 10 spots higher than Anthony Richardson every single week? I'm going to guess you're going to probably have him in that 20 range too. Bo Nix and Anthony Richardson is not even a fantasy question at this point.
Well, in a season where I've gotten a lot wrong, I was actually pretty far ahead of the Bo Nix consensus. I thought he was a really good super flex play. So that's one thing that I got right. It's not a league winning decision, but it is a green check mark. But one thing I'm worried about with Anthony Richardson, he slots quarterback 24 for me, is that he's made bad decisions, not just in the pocket, but as a runner. And I wonder if they're going to be less proactive with him as a runner. I know this is speculation. I mean, who the heck knows? And the Jets defense, I think I would like to think the Jets defense would actually show up this week. They did not show up at Arizona, 28 first downs on 57 snaps or something like that. That's a historically bad performance against, albeit an Arizona offense that can make you look bad on the right day. But I don't know what version of Richardson we're getting. The thing I would like to point out is that the Colts have played a harder than average schedule to this point. The schedule gets easier going forward. This is a good on-board spot, even if we're being denied the Joe Flacco revenge game. A lot of revenge games every week. The Flacco revenge game against the Jets I was looking forward to. We've been denied that. But I don't see the same rushing equity for Richardson that I might have seen 2 months ago. Even 2 months ago, I was like, why are you taking Anthony Richardson? Jaden Daniels offers all the things you like about Richardson, and he's already a better passer. He's already had more experience as a college player. There are just so many flags with Richardson anyway, but the Colts are doing the right thing. I know it kind of took their wide receiver ranks all down. We talked about that on the different podcasts, but I don't have Richardson as a proactive play at all. Even in Superflex leagues, I'd like to see a prove-it game before I put him in anything close to a circle of trust.
So he might be the quarterback that's on people's minds because it's in the news, but it doesn't mean that he's fantasy relevant. I think that's the big thing to take away, because I think people are going to be tempted with asking that question. One that maybe people did not also have on their card and just kind of stands out a little bit when you see a lot of chalky plays is Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson is 10 on the QB list this week going up against Baltimore, which is actually giving given a 4-star rating on Fantasy Pros ranks and a B matchup grade. But this is where you two have got a really big discrepancy as far as QB goes. Scott, you are higher. You've got him at QB7, and Fitz does not have him as a QB1. So, Scott, let's start with you on your take and why you've got Russell Wilson so high in these ranks.
Yeah, I know that the touchdown rate for Russell Wilson is probably unsustainable, and we know Pittsburgh runs the ball more proactively than any team in the NFL, but they have to look at this matchup. Everybody is throwing the ball all over the yard against the Ravens. It doesn't matter if you're a good offense, a bad offense. How did the Raiders ever win at Baltimore? Just never going to figure that one out. But so I think Russell Wilson already has 2 touchdowns in his back pocket. And if the Ravens, granted, we think about Baltimore-Pittsburgh games, they're usually those rock fights, those 16-13 games. This is going to blow up that theme. This is going to be a 30-27 type of game, or at least a 24-23 type of game. And so I think Wilson will get his multiple touchdowns, will probably pass 30-35, maybe even 40 times in this game. It's not the way Pittsburgh wants to play. Baltimore will force them because of the quality of their offense and because of the shoddy nature of their secondary. Everybody, think of what Jameis Winston did against the Ravens with a few picks to the side or drop picks to the side. I mean, everybody throws against Baltimore, and I think Pittsburgh would be silly not to try to take advantage of that.
Yeah, and that's clearly going to be the game plan, is you can throw on Baltimore if anything else. That's what you can do. But Fitz, you're not as optimistic. You've got him at QB 16 right now. So that's like mid-tier, like super flex second quarterback, not touching the top 10.
The ranking of Russ is one I was very conflicted on this week. And maybe I should pay heed to the ranking or the matchup, I should say, because, yeah, you can throw on Baltimore. It's hard to run on Baltimore. They are a pass funnel defense. I just wonder, like, is Arthur Smith going to play into that, or will he beat his head against the brick wall and keep trying to run it? Because the Steelers are the second run heaviest team in the league. They're running the ball on 53.3% of their offensive plays. Russ has thrown fewer than 30 passes in all 3 of his starts so far. And Scott mentioned it, like the touchdown rate, 7.1%, probably not sustainable. Averaging 8.7 yards per attempt, Russ is so far. That's better than any season he's had in his career. Even his heyday in Seattle, his high water mark was 8.3 yards per attempt. So I don't love his pass catching weaponry, even with the addition of Mike Williams. So I'm just sort of wondering if we are going to see Arthur Smith sort of open up the throttle with this offense and throw it a lot. And, I think Russ is over his head with the efficiency so far.
I mean, come on, Pat. When has Arthur Smith ever let us down?
Never.
Yeah, no kidding. The quarterback you have kind of on the opposite end, like your version of Russ here, Pat, is CJ Stroud. He comes in at ECR 13, so he didn't make this top 12 list. You've got him, I have that inverse. So that's actually Scott. I have him at 11, and Pat, you also hate all of these quarterbacks that Scott likes. So I don't shame on you. CJ Stroud comes in at 11 for Scott, Fitz at 18. So actually, Fitz, why do you hate CJ Stroud amongst the obvious?
Can I say I hate his offensive line and like CJ Stroud a lot? I mean, like, Houston's offensive line has been crisis level bad now for a month. And over that last month, 4 games, CJ Stroud has completed 53.7% of his passes, averaging 198.5 passing yards per game and 6.6 yards per attempt. And he's been sacked 18 times. So even though Stroud is probably getting Nico Collins back this week, even though he's got a very enticing matchup against the Cowboys. And by the way, it's a much more enticing matchup for CJ Stroud than it is for anyone who wants to watch Sunday Night Football this week. I mean, what a terrible capper to a Sunday of football. But anyway, I just can't get over how bad the Houston offensive line has been, and that's why I can't rank Stroud anywhere near QB1 territory.
Scott, it's pretty easy to envision that this rank is relative to Nico Collins being back finally and just kind of improving this offense in general.
Yeah, I'm glad the game is on Monday night. I'm sorry. I'm sad the game is on Monday night, because if it were a Sunday night game, I think they could have flexed out of it. And that's a decision the NFL has to make with a lot of Dallas games. We can't flex out of the Thanksgiving game, of course, but there's a bunch of standalone Cowboy games that the NFL is going to want to. Do people want to watch a train wreck? Do people want to watch Jerry Jones throw his fists up against the sun? What a strange conversation that was. I've actually, in my recent exclusive to you Fantasy Pros ranks, I've moved CJ Stroud down to 14, and I agree with Pat's concerns about that offensive line. Also, this is a game you think it's always a double-edged. It's always a hit or a miss or a gift and a curse when you have an opponent you're supposed to handle comfortably. But does that mean Stroud has to make his hay in 2 or 3 quarters? Because the fourth quarter he's handing off. The fourth quarter maybe he's on the bench because the game has gotten out of hand. I do think they got something going with John Mechie last week, and maybe he could be the third piece that this passing game desperately needs. And I would think Collins being as close as he was last week, I feel pretty confident he will play this week. But some of the seam calls, I have Nix over Stroud now. I have Goff over Stroud. It's hard to know what you're getting from Goff, but I still have him higher. I have Patrick Mahomes. What a weird fantasy season he's had. Maybe a season and a half at this point. Even Jameis Winston, revenge over CJ Stroud. So he's just a seam call for me. I don't trust the offensive line, and I think Bobby Slowick needs to get more of those easy buttons, more screens, more quick hitters, because CJ Stroud, they've rattled the cage, and he doesn't have the confidence and the pocket presence that maybe we saw in his rookie year, and that's something they need to rebuild if Houston's going to be a serious team in the playoffs. Another thing we have to factor in for fantasy, by the way, I mean, there are a lot of teams, Buffalo, Houston, the Lions may come into this. We'll see where it goes, but the Chiefs for sure, that could probably clinch their divisions really, really early. I almost wonder if the NFL needs a different structure, because these 4-team divisions can often get out of hand quickly, and then teams have to play a very unusual guessing game in December. How much should we play hurt guys now? Should we rest? Are we going to get rusty? Are we going to get boat raced in the playoffs because we're not sharp? I'm a little bit worried about what some of these teams are going to look like in December when they don't have playoff positioning really to fight over. So be glad if your players are in divisions that are competitive. 49ers come to mind because they're going to need every game. But CJ Stroud for me is somebody probably needs a prove it week before he's in any level of trust for me.
Let's go look at the tight end ranks, the top 12 on the board for this week. Speaking of the 49ers, George Kittle is at the tippy top for our tight end ranks. We've got Travis Kelce, Brock Bowers, copy paste for your top 3. David Njoku comes in at number 4, followed by TJ Hawkinson. Bam, TJ Hawkinson, top 5. Well, I almost acted like more surprised than I should have been. Mark Andrews at 6, Evan Engram, Kyle Pitts, Tucker Kraft, Taysom Hill, Sam Laporta, and Dallas Goedert. Pretty standard-ish names. It's going to be hard to talk yourself off of those. Taysom Hill, maybe like the diciest of questionable ones. But we do have a few little discrepancies as far as the ranks go. Evan Engram, ECR 7. Scott, you've got him at 8. And Fitz, you got him at 10. Fitz, is this all about Mac Jones? Mac Jones not throwing to tight ends or being efficient or just, being good?
It is. I mean, you talked about the grossness of the tight end position, Welsh, at the top of the show. And there you have it. Like 2 of the guys we thought maybe were dependable, at least as far as volume. Evan Engram, Jake Ferguson, completely kneecapped by their quarterback situations now. So those guys are outside the circle of trust where they were once safely inside. And this is why we're pumping up TJ Hawkinson, a guy coming off a major knee injury, and Mark Andrews, a guy who was a ghost for the first 5 or 6 games of the season. All of a sudden, they're top 6 tight ends now. So, like Engram had 8 targets last week, 6 catches. Those 6 catches netted 40 yards. I feel like that's basically like a good outcome for Evan Engram, which is pretty sad.
I remember it's just like every week it was just like, oh, Mark Andrews. And it's just like we're in a place now where it's like, oh my God, like I wish you had Mark Andrews, week in and week out. But Scott, your take on Evan Engram.
I'm just afraid they're going to score 10 points or fewer. And again, I think really highly of this Detroit defense. Aaron Glenn doing a great job as coordinator. It's just a shame Hutchinson got hurt because he was going to be in contention, I think, for Defensive Player of the Year. But Darius Smith will offset some of that. They got playmakers on all 3 levels, and this game is going to get ugly. I know people might think, well, they just beat Houston, this big statement game, national TV. Maybe this will let down. This is going to be 28-0 at halftime. And it's just going to be a matter of what the Jaguars do. Do they try to come back, or they just, run the ball, get on the bus, and reevaluate? Maybe Doug Peterson doesn't make it out of November. But you can't. One thing you could always hang your hat on with Engram is that Trevor Lawrence never met a 5-yard pass he didn't want to throw. I don't know if Mac Jones is going to be the same guy or not. I mean, as poorly as Lawrence is playing, we have to take this offense even further down with Mac Jones. So, I mean, Tucker Kraft for me is over Engram. Pitts, who's never somebody you can ever feel that good about, is over Engram. And I may even play Taysom Hill over Evan Engram, too.
And by the way, the Lions have allowed the second fewest fantasy points to tight ends, too. So it's a bad matchup, and it's the Mac Jones factor.
Also, a cheap plug to our co-site Betting Pros, because I'm going to be looking at betting the first half on Detroit. So if you guys wanted to, if you haven't, download the app Betting Pros, go to bettingpros.com or on your app store, iOS or Android. We've also got the free offer right now, a month free access to our premium Betting Pros product. All free for an entire month. So you could, finish out a strong point of the NFL season. Download the app, use FP free. You will see me, if you follow me and you do that, betting the first half of the Detroit Lions. Whatever the spread is, I will be doing that. Another tight end on here is Dallas Goedert. Dallas Goedert, tight end 12. Pianowski, you got him at 12. Fitz, you've got him at 16. So let's go to the hate real quick. One thing I was going to note is it's funny because I felt like there was so much every week it was this guy could maybe do this. And it was maybe we go here. I don't feel like that exists anymore. We're not interested in Cole Kmet, Pat Freiermuth is, you're kind of screwed and you got to throw him in here. We're not trying to make statements for Colby Parkinson. We kind of know what tight end is now, and it's not that great. And Dallas Goedert is probably a representation of it, and he has fallen outside of your top 12.
Yeah, I hate to be the hater on the quarterback tight end show, the designated hater, but I have to be that way because while it was nice to see Dallas Goedert come back and score a touchdown in his first game back from an ankle injury, he did have 2 catches for 25 yards. And that's kind of the concern with me, the target volume, the reception volume. Jalen Hurts has thrown 25 or fewer passes in each of his last 5 games. This is another team that will try to line it up in the wishbone practically and run it down your throats. The Eagles, they've averaged 20.6 pass attempts over those 5 games. So this is the run heaviest team in the league, and Goedert has to share what few targets there are with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith.
Scott, is Dallas Goedert the line of where you just put your hands up at tight end? You're I don't know, because you got Laporta before that, Taysom. We kind of know what Taysom Hill is, but is Dallas Goedert the start of okay, literally this is an audible version of Dallas Goedert is going, okay, is that what he is, or do you have a little bit more trust in him?
Yeah, it's kind of punt formation, right? I mean, you're playing him or Freiermuth, you're playing him or even Will Dissly or Jake Ferguson with no quarterback, Hunter Henry, not consistent, Jonnu Smith, guys like that. When Goedert has produced this week, it's been because one of his major receivers hasn't been available. So with everybody on deck in Philadelphia, you got to figure he's going to have 2 or 3 catches.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're going to probably have a lot more on the tight end questions and maybe more quarterbacks. Don't forget, we got a weekly start and sit live stream on our YouTube where you can ask whatever question. It could be about Jake Ferguson. It could be about Dallas Goedert. It can be hey, Fitz, why do you hate CJ Stroud? Whatever you want. Why do you hate this? Why do you hate that? You can do it over on the live stream, youtube.com/FantasyPros, Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern. Make sure you're locked in. Hit the notifications so you do not miss it. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. For Pat Fitzmaurice and Scott Pianowski, I'm Chris Welsh. We'll talk to you next time right here on Fantasy Pros.